We're going to talk a little bit about nuki-suke, or nuki-uchi, which is the drawing of the sword. This is a major facet of Iaido study in that it's, in loose terms, it's what separates it from an Iai art from a kenjutsu art. A lot of times, kenjutsu implies that the swords are already out and you're already engaged in battle. Okay? It's not always the case, but that's just a loose difference between the two. Iai has to do with drawing the sword and making that draw the initial technique. All right? So naturally, if we're going to be cutting off of that draw, the technique has to have certain elements to it. One of them is that the cutting edge of the sword has to be on track to cutting whatever the selected target is. So what that means is, if I'm going to cut this way, I have to have the sword turned in that direction so that when it comes out, the cutting edge is on its way to the target in this direction. That, again, we get into the fingerprint of your style. So many different styles have different ways of approaching this. Some schools will turn the sword way before. Okay? Some schools wait until the very last second before they turn it to set the angle up. All right? Regardless, a lot of times what you're seeing is, especially when you're watching traditional Iai, is you're seeing a demonstration of it. And with the availability of video out there, being able to see different people doing it different ways is a little bit misleading. A lot of times sword teachers, especially Japanese instructors, they don't always demonstrate stuff in public the way that they really do it, and that's because they are in fact doing it in public. So there's always going to be a little bit of misleading tendency when they're doing this. So if you see an instructor do something like this before he draws to cut, he may be slowing it down so his students can see what he's doing. He may be trying to mislead anybody watching him to thinking that's exactly how they do it, and in turn developing the wrong conclusion about their particular art. All right? But all of that aside, the most important part about doing the draw, the cut off the draw, is to make sure that you have that cutting angle set up, all right? Or hasuji, which is the angle of the cut. Now, different schools, again, different angles, different targets, things like that. We're not going to get into that. What we are going to get into is one of the things that you need to make sure you're doing is on top of the sword coming out, the saya has to come off. All right? So if you're starting with the sword way out here, I'm going to over-exaggerate. You can see I can't get the sword out. Okay, and I naturally can't get a cut moving fast enough to do any sort of damage. So you have to, again, following the guidelines of the particular style that you're doing, you're going to have the saya in a certain position when you go to grab the sword, and then the sword's going to come out. And the sword coming out and the saya coming off is all going to work together for this draw. And again, we're not going to get into stylistic differences. These are the elements, however, that you should be looking for. If you're not seeing any of that, if you're simply seeing this, then there's no art there. There's simply somebody who thinks they've seen something on a video and are trying to imitate them. But there really is a lot more to the draw than what there appears to be. So, again, one hand has to go to the saya. The suba, the sword guard, has to be secured. Then, in some fashion, the hand is going to get to the handle. The koiguchi is going to be opened by the thumb pushing the suba open. And again, There are several ways of doing simply that. Opening the thumb, position of the thumb, placement on the tsuba, all of that. Again, fingerprints to a particular style. This has to be opened up. The sword is going to start on its way somehow, and then the angle, the selected angle of the cut is going to be applied, sword turned at whatever time, and then a nice clean cut is going to be made here. Now that brings up the different angles. If I'm going to be cutting what is called kiriage, or cutting up, then naturally, at the time I'm going to draw, my saya has to be turned so that the sword, kind of like a pocket knife, the sword in the saya is like a pocket knife opening up. Okay? So you have to set this thing up depending on how you're going to draw. You don't want to hit flat. If I'm going to be cutting with this kiriage, I don't want to pull it out here and then turn it as I'm on the way to the target, because then I'm going to end up hitting the flat of the sword up against something. Okay? So get the angle turned and then cut here. A sideways cut, yokogiri or yoko uchimanji. Okay, again, set that angle up, cut here. A simple kesagiri off the draw or angle cut. Leave the saya right where it is and cut. Rarely you're going to see a different type of draw. You may see something coming around this way. You may see, at the higher levels, advanced drawing techniques. You're not going to see somebody who is an entry-level practitioner doing that stuff. So when you're watching a video or a demonstration of what you think is Iaido, and it looks something other than simple. Iaido is supposed to be simple. Simple works. If somebody is trying to make more of it than it really is, then it's not going to be, I would venture to say it's not going to be authentic Iai. Okay, so one more time. Kiriage. Yoku uchimanji. Kesagiri.